So, wonderful. Everybody has a microphone. Please take a seat. Feel comfortable on stage. So, I'm very delighted to welcome now 5 people from the Zurich University of Applied Science from 5 different research groups. And what we're doing right now is we will have 5 pitches, so each an individual person prepared 1 slide for you with 1 main message, and it's very fascinating numbers, I can say that already. And then after that we go into a little panel discussion. So we start with Nadina. So you can come here, you show your slide, and tell us something about it.
Good, I'm very pleased to be here today. I brought you one number, 56% food gap. So what does it mean? If we look at 2050, we need 56% more food than we produced 2010. If we go on eating the way we do, producing food the way we do, and processing it the same way that we do today. If we look a bit more closely at the emissions that we cause by food production and processing, it's enormous. So 25% of all the greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to food production and processing. Roughly 50% of all habitable land is used for food production, and 70% of all freshwater withdrawal. But this is just one side of the coin. On the other side of the coin, we lose roughly 1/3 of all this valuable food along the value chain due to different reasons, depending on the step in the value chain. So coming from food processing, I obviously focus on that step, and it's quite an important one because there we lose 35%, and 35% of 1.2 billion tons per year is enormous. So that's really an area where we can do a lot of change if we go forward. And we have to affect this change. So what are the options? We can either produce and process new types of food that are less emissions, causing less emissions, or if we go on with the types of food we are currently consuming and producing, we can either process them more in their entirety so that you don't lose any of the raw material. For example, process wheat into whole grain instead of separating it in different components and then simply using the white core and throwing out the rest. Tilo will talk more about that area later on. The other option is that if we produce the same way, process the same way we do now, we can make the most out of these side streams that we produce. And side streams, I guess most of you are familiar with it, but side streams are anything besides the main material that you try to produce. So could be coffee spent ground from coffee production, or oil press cake from the oil pressing, or fruit pommes from beverage production, etc. And we can then either use just minor components out of it, which are usually valuable, but don't contribute a lot to save the world, or we can try to process the entire mass and bring it back into the food value chain. There's a lot of promise in that, but also quite some challenges. And starting with the promise is that we have a lot of nutrients in it. So usually they are high in protein, high in fiber, contain valuable fatty acids, and lots of micronutrients. On the a bit more challenging side, they also often contain more contaminants like heavy metals, pesticides, etc., that we need to get rid of before we bring it back into the food value chain, because we don't want to bring the bad parts with us. We also have to change the texture in a way that we produce a product that people want to eat, so a desirable product that is nice to eat, tastes good, has a good texture. We have to do that in a way that where legal restrictions are fulfilled, and in the end it has to be economic, because otherwise no one will do it. So these are the areas that we focus on. We try to bring forward new solutions, how to process side streams into valuable products. And we then also measure what effect this has on the environmental impact points, because this is a critical area. If we have a lot of processing, for example, a lot of drying in our processing, we might actually kill the benefits that we try to bring forward. And so this is our contribution to at least help fill part of this 56% food gap that we face And I hope to bring forward with my team and my colleagues lots of good and promising solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nadina. A common saying is that we actually do not need to produce more food because there is already 1.5 times more food available and we waste a lot of food. Wouldn't the problem just be solved if we redistribute the food more evenly, even for 40% more people by 2050?
In the end, no, unfortunately. I mean, yes, we produce a lot of food, but one thing is that if we redistribute and we still have a difference in how much money people make, it will be always a benefit of the rich versus the poor. Mm-hmm. But the other main thing is that with this amount of food we produce, what is calculated in it is also everything that is lost, mm-hmm. everything that is fed to animals, and which is quite a large fraction. Yes. And if we, for example, focus on this fraction that is fed to animals, we cannot simply assume that if we feed the same material to people, that will work, because we don't eat soy and maize, etc. We need a more diverse diet, and this diet takes more resources to produce.
Okay, thank you very much. So, I welcome next Tilo Hühn on stage. And he will talk about regenerative food processing. Tilo, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Dennis. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation. Happy to show you some solutions of our institute. Nadina started with science streams. We claim all streams are mainstream. What does that mean? But before, I want to quote or re-quote what Jason Fonda said in the 60s. We behave like we have a second world in the trunk of our truck. And if you look for the Earth Overshoot Day, this year it will be in average in July, and in the developed countries it comes close to the beginning of the year. We have to do something. So what do we contribute? Yeah, we develop some processes like that one, extracting more of the good of cocoa beans. You're invited to test that later on in the break. And this is our newest project. My number is 55 million tons of nuts per year. And you know, these nuts, they have hard shells. Some shells are harder than other ones, but the shells are wasted. They use it as straw for the cattle or burn it after that to get some energy out of it, but it's produced. It's an agricultural product. And what we developed is an usage of the hard shells. You hear right, we use the hard shells of almonds or hazelnuts, and we mill it down to the ground like chocolate in a relation of 1 to 4 with water. And then we get the slurry, getting some drink out of it. It's not the milk. Some people on that planet can call it milk, but it's a drink, hazelnut drink or almond drink. And at the other side, we get the solids, and if we want, the fat. The solids are very interesting. You can develop some recipes from the market leader a little bit further. You know perhaps that chocolate spread contains a lot of sugar, 52%. By using our material, we can double the content of hazelnuts in that sample. Usually 13% of hazelnut kernels are used. And in our recipe, you can use 26% for almost the same price. You know, the cheapest filler in foodstuff is sugar, around $600 a ton. But using the hard shell is even more cheaper because you have to pay around $60 a ton. And these hard shells containing fibers and some really interesting factors, vitamins and antioxidants. And in our recipe, we reduced the 52% of sugar by 13% of the hard shells down to 39% of sugar. And I can swear you, it was still sweet like hell. Reducing sugar is one of the most important things in food industry. Balancing is really key when it comes to acidity, because of convenience products, they have to be stable. So more and more acid is used, and we deliver a new system for bringing the balance back. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tilo. I still have a question for you, Tilo. What does integrated upcycling mean?
Yeah, you see, Nadina said it's important to come to the side streams, but it's more important to have no side streams. Yeah? So we want to do an integrated upcycling step by using these hard shells which are wasted before.
Thank you very much. So now I come to Professor Dr. Susanne Miescher Schwenninger from the Food Biotechnology Research Group. Your 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. You hear me? Yes. So thank you as well from my side for being here today, for the invitation. And after we learned about side stream and mainstreams and upcycling, I'm now here to introduce you in how the microorganisms can help with this. Does this work? Yes. So I'm here today with 2 numbers. So first the world population, 8.2 billion humans on Earth, estimated number. And my second number is the number of living lactic acid bacteria in a 500-gram jar of yogurt. That is 5 billions per these 500 grams of yogurt of living lactic acid bacteria in these 500 grams. So this is just a simple numerical estimation or example based on the 2 numbers, but it leads me to introduce you into the high potential of functional microbial microorganisms and also bioconversion that has been rediscovered within the last decades. So originally fermentation, as the yogurt that we have here, is a traditional, not the yogurt is a spontaneous process, but traditionally fermentation is a spontaneous process that has thousands of years history. On the other side, we recognize today's almost endless possibilities in combining or in selecting functional microbial strains, combining them together, implementing them with different processing steps, or even placing them on different substrates. At the end, we have enormous numbers of, or even endless numbers of possibilities in producing safe, healthy, and delicious food of high quality and still in a very natural way. So let me allow you to give me some examples from our current research. For example, we work on an innovative pre-processing that is based on fermentation of pea-based substrates to finally be extruded into meat alternatives or snacks. The fermentation process aims at an improvement of texture or flavor for the final meat alternatives after extrusion, or on a natural accumulation of the B vitamins or degradation of FODMAPs, so fructose, oligosaccharides, and all these non-digestive component saccharides that are present in pea and that may result in a not so good digestion. So the microorganisms help us as well in that way for the final product. A second example is the fermentation of a side stream that we just learned from Nadina, the wheat bran, fermentation of side stream, aiming at a degradation of fibers and also a lightening of the fermentate to later be introduced in the extrusion of pasta. And finally, as a third example, not the last example, but the last example of today, is a microbial degradation of mycotoxins that we apply in a fermentation process on grains. So these are all examples, and we are not able to work on them alone. The way, or even the way of success of that research is a very strong collaboration with my colleagues that I have at ZHAW. So we, the food biotechnologists, we work or even play with the functional microbial microorganisms. We select them, we find them, we test them in the fermentations. but we have the strong collaboration with the food technologists that help us to prepare the crop into, or to transfer the crop into a fermentable substrate, and finally to design and produce a food out of the fermented substrate. Then we need as well the food chemists who help us to understand on a molecular level the fermentation process, and if we understand the fermentation process, we are as well able to optimize it. And finally, the food packaging experts who help us, or who finally find a regenerative shell around the new food product that has been produced by help of the microorganisms. Let me come back to this example I brought with me. The lactic acid bacteria that we have here in the yogurt, they also don't work alone. They need each other, as we need it in our strategy to work on a regenerative food processing. So with that, I would like to end and thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Susanne. So I have a very pragmatic approach. Since you brought the yogurt jar, how can these 5 billion lactic acid bacteria actually help nourishing over 8.2 billion people?
Yes, how can they help? So we harbor in our collection, so that's the ZHAW collection that is located in our new Future of Food campus. We harbor there a growing collection of over 14,000 microbial isolates, so microorganisms that we isolated from different spontaneous fermentations, substrates, environmental samples, and that are just there ready to help and support us, our little helpers, or even our 14,000 co-workers, as I always say. And our task is to find the right strains, the right combinations, to find the food fermentation processing steps and also the substrate, so that it finally can be introduced into food processing, as I mentioned, with all my colleagues.
Okay, thank you very much,
You're
Susanne.
welcome.
Okay, so a very warm welcome to Professor Dr. Irene Chetschik. She is from the Food Chemistry Research Group.
Thank you. So thank you very much for the kind introduction to be here today to present you the activities of our research group. So yeah, the main activities are about the understanding of the molecular message of food. So, but I'm going to start also with some numbers as examples, as my colleagues did. So there are about 26,000 molecules that can be found in food. And among those molecules, we have around 130 key nutrients. And among the 26,000 of molecules, less than the half is volatile. And among the 11,000 volatile compounds, only a small part, only 230 compounds, can be considered as aroma active. So aroma active compounds are the ones that are interacting with the odor receptors in our nose and are responsible for the perception for a specific odor of a food. And yeah, so how may I say, our job is to create analytical tools to detect all those value determining components in food. And for this, we develop and implement different methodologies. Unfortunately, there is no single method available that can quantify and detect all those compounds together at once. And yeah, for example, like for the odor active compounds, we need to combine methodologies that implement instrumental analysis with human sensory perceptions, because we need the human sensory perception in order to detect really the compounds that are responsible for a specific odor of a food. So yeah, all those developed methodologies we apply in order to investigate the impact, for example, for new agronomical practices or from novel processing methodologies, or also the fermentation on the chemical constitutions of food raw material and the final products. So, and this we do in collaborations with our colleague from the Institute and also other research groups. So those methodologies that we develop, we also implement them for the characterization of potential novel food materials that can be introduced in foods of the future. And we also investigate the flavor properties of alternative protein plant-based food in order to understand the molecular, the flavor properties on molecular level. So, and all this knowledge that we are acquiring is helpful in order to develop sustainable, healthy, and delicious food of tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Because you just mentioned it, I would like to ask you how specifically the work you're doing contributes to building sustainable or regenerative food systems.
Thank you for this question. So the data that we are delivering by our developed methodologies, they help, for example, to set up novel processing techniques, which, for example, use less energy or produce less side streams. And then we investigate how those processes can be adapted in order to create a specific chemical profile that is rich, still rich in nutrients and also flavorful.
Okay, thank you very much, Irene. So, and finally, the stage is yours, Professor Dr. Selçuk Yildirim from the Center for Food Processing and Packaging.
Thank you very much. So from the food, now we come to the packaging. And I have a number, 397 million tons. So it's a quite big number, and from the unit, maybe you can already estimate, so it's a kind of amount of something, a huge amount of something. So 397 million tons is the amount of the plastic that has been produced in a single year, in year 2021. So since the invention of the plastics in 1950s up to now, it is estimated that we have produced 9 billion tons of plastics. And production of such huge amount of plastic have contributed quite a lot to the climate change, because it resulted quite a lot of the CO2 release, and as well as quite significant amount of these plastic that have been produced during the last 70 years are staying somewhere in the earth. We polluted our planet. So the most part of the plastic that we produce today, we use for packaging application, by far most, almost the half of that. Yeah. And of course, the plastic packaging protects the content quite well. It increases the shelf life of the product. It helps us to deliver safe and high quality food products from the production to the consumers. It helps us also to reduce the food waste, contribute to the sustainability as well. But what we do not do good is that we do not manage the packaging waste. Today, globally, about 40% of the packaging waste ends up in nature as landfills, and even worse, about 30% of the packaging waste also ends up in nature in an uncontrolled way, and mostly in oceans. Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is one of the major foundations in that area, working for the sustainability, estimates that if it continues like that, in 2050, we are going to have more plastic particles in the ocean than the fish. So for the sake of the health of our planet, we need to break this plastic problematic. And in the area of the packaging, there are certain strategies which we can act, which we can perform to reduce this environmental impact of the packaging. The first one is the elimination of the packaging which is not necessary. Unfortunately, there's still quite a lot of examples, packaging examples on the market where we can, without having any big innovation, we can just skip them, we can just eliminate them, especially in the secondary and tertiary and transport packaging area. We should use the high technologies also to reduce the amount of the packaging, plastic packaging we need. And we should also reduce the amount of the plastic packaging by just reducing the amount for the given product, but also replacing it with sustainable alternatives. There are some bio-based materials, for example, which we can use for then as an alternative, or use recyclable materials. And the third strategy, which is also very important, is the reuse. Yeah, unfortunately, which is used not so much for the food applications. We just have for some beverage applications and reusable beverage packages, yeah, but not for so much for the food. But we should use them as much as we do. Yeah. When we buy cars, we use them again. Yeah. When we buy clothes, we use them again. None of the materials almost we take it, we just only use it and throw it away. Why not packaging also? Yeah. And importantly also, that if we cannot reuse, then we should recycle the materials and use it for the production of the packaging. Today, we only recycle 2% of the plastics, only 2%, and use it again back for the production of the packaging. And this is quite less. We should significantly increase this amount. And last but not least, so we will always need also virgin materials, yeah, for new materials, and there we should use the bio-based materials, bio-based sources to make the packaging out of that. Yeah. And so with my group at the Zurich University of Applied Sciences, so we work on these different strategies, especially the reduction of the packaging, replacement of the packaging with sustainable alternatives, and making the packaging more recyclable. But also, we work also on the thematic of the side streams, and we use the side streams to produce bio-based materials to replace the plastic alternatives. Yeah. So some of the examples have been mentioned. So for example, we make packaging materials from the potato peels, from the chips production, or cacao bean shells, or rapeseed cakes, and so on. And these are the valuable materials which we can really use, and in a huge amount happening in Switzerland. And we should use, or we should develop, also use these materials to develop sustainable packaging in future. And last, I would like to mention, so sustainable food needs also sustainable packaging for a healthy planet. Thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent time management. Thank you very much. A huge compliment to all of you. One last question for you, Selçuk, regarding what you have just said. You mentioned some sustainable packaging strategies. So which one, in your opinion, has the greatest significance?
Yeah, unfortunately, with none of them alone, we can solve the problem. Yeah? So we need a complementary approach. We need a comprehensive approach, including all of them. Yeah? So the problem is quite big, and it's on a global basis. And therefore, so some of them we can apply actually tomorrow without big innovations like elimination, some reduction, and so on. And some of them maybe in some midterm, making the packaging more recyclable with the new regulations coming in the European Union. I think in the next decades we are going to see quite a lot of movements in that area. And for the future, we should find the alternatives and not use the fossil-based, but use the bio-based alternatives, and that requires quite a lot of research and improvement and development in that area.
Okay, thank you. You can have a seat now, because we will turn now into a little panel discussion. And my dear audience, you can also prepare for your contributions. And now is the time also to comment and ask questions, our dear speakers. But I just want to follow up with Selçuk very quickly. You mentioned biodegradable packaging and compostable packaging. Wouldn't that solve the plastic problem we have?
Unfortunately, not really. So the people think that compostable packaging or biodegradable packaging is the solution of the problem we have, but it's a quite complex problem. We cannot solve it that. As I mentioned before, so when we buy the car, we don't just use once and then throw it away or let it biodegrade. Yeah? So we want to keep it in the system as long as possible. So we should drive the circular economy and should keep the materials in the circle. In that area, so in the developed countries at least, it makes sense to develop bio-based materials, not necessarily biodegradable, but bio-based materials, and keep them in cycle and recycle them and use once more and once more. In some countries where you don't have the facilities, let's say, to collect the materials or to recycle them, to reintroduce in the production, and causing the problem, pollution problem, there, specifically, it makes sense to use biodegradable materials so that these materials do not stay in the environment forever. But for the developed countries, we should try the bio-based alternatives and recycle and try to reuse it as much as possible.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions so far or comments? There is a microphone waiting for you. Yes, over there, the gentleman, please.
How can a legal framework support this transformation? We have a lot of regulation, reducing risk almost to zero, like a Novel Food Act, expiry dates with very limited scientific foundation, and all these regulations. How do you see chances to accelerate this needed transformation by also innovate the legal framework?
Tilo?
Before I answer, let me say perhaps there are some officials from Canton Zurich. As a researcher, we are really grateful. You have seen that perhaps this morning. We are really grateful about that makerspace we now can work on following these goals of planetary health diet. Thank you very much. So your questions on novel food. Novel food, or let's say what we have to apply in Switzerland too, not only in Europe. By the way, Switzerland is a front runner on making things possible. The first application was in cosmetics for my colleagues, Dieter and Regina Eibel, on a special cosmetic product produced with cell culture, and now we know that there was application on insects, mealworms, and so on. This was really early too, fast moving before European community, and now we are facing that the same could happen when it comes to testing of some cellular meat. Overall, this is a big challenge. You know, there are some stage gates. You have to do a lot to get a novel food regulation. By the way, this shell thing is novel food too, because no one was able to eat the hard shells before 1997. But it takes years, for sure. Yeah? You have to do your work seriously. But at the other side, we have to be sure that there is no risk from the new food processing to the customer. And from a legislative perspective, let me say, apply. Yeah? So we have to apply. We have to bring new products, and they can judge on. This will take some time, but they will learn, and they will go faster and faster. And I think all the political system will push them a little bit to be a little bit faster. Yeah, but at the end, it's like that. It's to really have a secure and safe foodstuff.
Another question, I see the lady is raising the hand over there.
Thanks. Just another question concerning novel food. How long is the average approval time in Switzerland? Is it the same as in the European Union? And what would you suggest could be the first country to get on market with a novel food?
Nadina?
So I can actually not answer the question on how long it takes. It very much depends on how much information is around and how well it is presented, obviously, but I cannot give you a definite answer. But what we learned so far that in Switzerland is quite similar to the EU, and it makes sense to apply any novel food in the EU, not in Switzerland, because if it's applied, if it's granted in the EU, it's also applicable in Switzerland, but not the other way around. And it's not more complicated to apply in the European Union than in Switzerland, so it usually makes sense to start directly with the European Union.
Would you suggest to go in Great Britain on the first market? I think there it's easier to get the approval.
I'm sorry, but for this I'm the wrong person to ask. Okay. Our food quality and safety person is not here today, so I think, but we could ask her and let you know if you wish.
Thanks. And another question, I think it's the two ladies at the right side. Sorry, I forgot your names. Do you also use tools like electronic noses or a kind of that for your R&D and also for the students?
Thank you for this wonderful question. So yeah, electronic noses, the scientists are working on that since more than 30 years, but there is still no electronic nose available that can detect as good as our own nose can. So for this reason, we are still working with this gas chromatography olfactometry approach, because it's still the best tool to detect really the odorants that are responsible for a specific odor perception.
Aya, I see you in the very first row. Teresa from the Berlin Food Campus.
We're stepping into a new era with artificial intelligence. Where do you see the biggest potential for your research?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's it's a big challenge. We have to face that this could went really wrong. This I have to say at first. But beside that, I'm a fanboy. I'm really looking forward to. We are on the way to load GPT-4 on our process in Freienbach. They already invested 100 million Swiss francs. And now we started last week the project to load that up. If you see what happens in the last year, there are big opportunities. I mean, not only this new ways of applying simulated neural networks. There is a lot possible before, deterministic, but we want to go a step further. And when it comes to optimization of energy consumption, or let's say the biodiversity, which runs wild because of the climatic changes, we have to deliver, let's say, standardized quality at the end. But the raw material is really static in our industry. So they do batch processing, and they do not accept variations. What I see is with continuous working process that we can measure what the quality of the raw materials are, adapt with a process, not in every case, but in many cases, to establish a self-steering, continuous working process, which allows us to reach the goals of the final products with less energy consumption, with less food waste, and with big efficiency.
Katie?
I was really taken by the example of the nutshells being turned into another product. And I'm wondering about, on a global scale, how aggressively are we measuring the opportunity of these byproducts as a raw material? Is there a database? Is there a collective information source? As someone in a nutrition school, I'm always interested in, what are the bioactives? What are the vitamins and minerals? What are we throwing away? Like, we're throwing nutrition away. And so how aggressively are we really tracking these big byproducts? Shells are a really interesting piece of this. And then thinking about reuse. I don't know the insights on that.
And even also the content of nutrition of the byproducts.
That might drive it.
Yeah. Who wants?
If I may?
Nadina, yeah.
Yes. I think it very much depends on the countries we are talking about. In the European Union, there's a very good platform, actually, where know-how on side streams is shared, including anything from contaminants to specific high-quality components. I think there's a lot of know-how shared. But if I look at, let's say, a bit less poorer countries, also within the European Union, they simply don't get the data. they don't have the access we, for example, have in Switzerland, where we get a very good collaboration with companies who give us the data freely to work with in an anonymized way, but at least they give us the data. But in many other countries, the people simply don't get the data from companies, and so it's very difficult to establish quantities. But at least with respect to what is in it, there, I think the databases are really good nowadays.
Is that a place for government regulation to step in?
In the end, it might be necessary, but I think it's a last resort. We see in Switzerland that many companies have actually signed an agreement that they want to contribute, and now freely give the information, knowing that if they don't, then the government might step in. But I think it's still better to first try to get companies to contribute on their own without directly involving the government.
I can add additional information. So there's quite a lot of also literature research that has been done and the publications, which talks about the ingredients, valuable ingredients of the side streams and the amount of the side streams that's happening everywhere. There's also quite a lot of research that use the side streams, let's say, to produce some food products or some packaging products and so on. The problem is that there is a big gap between what has been done on a lab, and to the application of that, And this gap is too risky for a lot of industrial partners to apply it and to fill it, And therefore, we aim to, at our university, with a project, a common project that is supported by a foundation, to develop this gap and to generate the know-how and transfer this know-how to the food and packaging companies so that they can use the side streams and valorize better and easier way.
Thank you. Are there any more questions or comments, insights from your perspective?
May I comment on that too? I think this is really important. You know, Impossible Foods, they screen all over sources on the world available for food. Techno-functional abilities and sensory abilities and so on. And this is closed shop. And many companies do it like that. So there is really the public should step in and finance like this. Program here in Switzerland by Avina. This is important to have some public available informations founded by government or public.
I don't know that we have the willingness in the US.
Wait, the microphone maybe? Or no? No? Okay. Mrs. Rutzler?
I like the idea of ReNut very much, and I wonder what's the next step.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard it's not only almonds, it's also hazelnuts. Mm-hmm. But is there anything happening with bread or even apples with the huge topic of food production? What's happening there? And are there any figures? I think figures would be really helpful in this field.
Yeah, please, I invite you to join our commercial partner, ReNut, re-nut.com. You can find some other information. Yeah, we started in US because, it's easier to get a grass generally recognized as safe status, and we already get safe grass, and we are working on FDA grass. And this is the reason for starting in US. And we were there at the Almond Board Conference last year, and there was a lot of interest. I think this will really come to the market. And people we are talking to, they say, sustainability is a nice thing, but nobody pays for it. This is a little bit, but some people are willing to pay for it, but most of the people are not. And then it comes to the emissions, and they see 30% more volume, 40%, 50%, sometimes 70% more volume if you use the shell, and the same emissions. This is interesting. And then it comes to the health argument, and they say, okay, health claim, high fiber. This is really a thing. So I think we are witnessing something special here, and I'm happy that we are part of it, our institute. developing such processes which are patented, protected. Some are on the way, some are still granted. Yeah, so we will continue working on almonds. Next step, I think, will be hazelnuts and peanuts. Peanuts is less shell, but easy to process, let's say, and some almonds in California are really smooth when it comes to the shells. And then we will continue with walnuts. This works well too. So we can really use the high fibers of the hard shell. And I'm really looking forward that will come to the market.
Thank you, Tilo. Ah, there, a lady over there, another hand.
Hello, thank you so much. I would like to shift a little bit away from the, ivory tower thing, maybe focusing a bit more on the know-how transfer and how do you implement that, because all your brilliant research obviously needs to be implemented in some way. So Harvard showed us a bit of the idea of a menu change, default setting change, things like that. So how do you work and intersect with, for example, behavior design, sociologists, post-fem studies, all these areas? Are there any, are you reaching out to other also communities? Or because we were now looking at, the transfer within your specific research.
Who wants to answer this one?
So most of our projects, we have partners already from the industry, which would like to imply. So we do the transfer of the knowledge to the industry, at least from the technological point of view. It happens during the project in a very, very easy way. And when we develop technologies, we already consider also the capabilities of the partners or industrial processes, so that we developed already in that way, so that it can be really applied and has an impact later on the sustainability. And of course, the sustainability also contains, or the success on the market has a lot of different constraints. It's a bit difficult, let's say, to cover all of them. But I just can tell from the packaging area, we collaborate with some designers. With the Zurich University of Arts, for example, we combine the sustainability design with the material design together. And also we did a project where we had included also the consumers inside, consumer science, to be able to bring all these different disciplines together to have a better impact, have a better chance to survive in the market and has an impact on sustainability.
As in food regulatory, we have a group working on sensory science and customer science at our institute, and we have strong collaborations, and starting with every process where a product is the end of the game, with consumer centricity. So for sure we have strong scientific community in the ZHAW and outside. And in every application where the market is touched, we start with the thinking of the customer. I can swear you.
Susanne, yeah.
Perhaps, if I may add, you just mentioned like this ivory tower that is often mentioned with respect to research. I talked about the strong collaboration that we have, the different research groups. Perhaps what I missed is, in addition, the very strong collaboration we have with our partners. So all the research we do, all the development we do, I think in almost every single project we do is with an industrial partner that can be huge industry partners, but also small startups. And I think that is what makes also the success, so that we always have the application in front of us, so very close. So we know everything we research, finally, it must be applied.
May I also add something? We have many projects directly with partners, but for the one project that Selçuk and I are working on valorization of side streams, there our main goal was to finally have a project where it's not with one specific partner, but a project that is funded by a foundation, so we can publicly share what we learn. Because what we see many times, at least in Switzerland, is that every year we have the same inquiries. For example, 5 times a year I have the inquiry, how can I make my brewer spent grain safe? But all the companies keep that know-how to themselves. And I don't see this as useful if we re-investigate the basics time and again. So these not IP-relevant basics should be published and distributed for everyone. And then once you have these basics, you can go forward with clear solutions that you can bring to the market. And I think we should have a certain level that is public, and only from then on do IP-relevant stuff.
Yes, over here. Where is that? There, the microphone is coming from WPI.
So I think this applies maybe most accessibly to Renut, but also to the bio-based packaging. I'm thinking, and really all the side streams, I'm thinking about allergens. In the United States, we have really stringent sort of frameworks around allergens. So, you know, with nutshells, do people have the same allergic reaction to the nutshells? And how do you break into that market, knowing that there's, you know, in places where there are like these really stringent walls around when it comes to packaging and labeling when something might contain an allergen. Obviously nuts, that, you know, comes to mind when we think about tree nut allergies, but even allergies to the skins of certain fruits that then could be put into a side stream and then repackaged into bio-based packaging. But now you have a packaging that could only be used for certain things, or how does it get labeled? How do you kind of break down that wall?
Yeah, for packaging, there are different options, of course. Not all the packages come directly in contact with the food. So we have the secondary packaging, we have the transport packaging, and so on. So we have the possibilities. If we see any possibility that the side stream may have some can cause some allergic reactions, then we can use for non-contact food applications. So when we selected the side streams, we exactly first analyzed the content of that, and looked for actually what kind of allergenic compounds, but also some certain kind of chemicals that could be toxic, some certain kind of microbiologically spores and others that could be possible. So we analyze them, or we let them analyze, and then we look to also the literature to identify so that we can really canalize these in the right directions to have the right application afterwards. I mean, one of the projects, we wanted to use gluten to make packaging, and then we said, okay, what do we pack? Maybe we can pack gluten-containing bakery products. But at the end, yeah, we have to be aware. It's a nice comment. We should take care of that problematic. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else from your side? There were already quite good insights. I want one thing I want to highlight is because we often, Tilo, speak about, or everybody here, about regeneration and not so much anymore about sustainability, because we go a step further, you know, healing, rebuilding ecosystems, social systems. So can you enlighten us, Tilo, what is regenerative food processing, and do you have some examples on that?
I've heard there is a regenerative farmer in the audience. Yes. I think they are still in discussion what is regeneration. Yeah. But you will perhaps agree that if someone takes the far path of biodiversity or the let's say the health of the soil, this has something to do with regeneration. When it comes to food processing, this is not so easy. Not only using regenerative energies, this is one point for sure, but what we see is to deal with the biodiversity, reducing waste by not using it because of the let's say the quality checkpoints are not at the right place because of climatic change. There is a bigger diversity. This is one element, and another element I would say beside the energy use is for sure this step we made with the side stream processing and the integrated upcycling. So prevent side streams, process everything and make it available for human nutrition, not to feed animals and then eat it. This is the second best way, or to do an application for packaging or so on. So this is our idea, being regenerative. And we face the reality that net zero is not enough. We have to do more. So this is perhaps part of our idea when it comes to regeneration, but it's not a definition which is static. We are on the way to do so.
I have one last question from my side for Susanne, actually, because it's a hot topic, because it sticks to my mind that you said we have these 14,000 co-workers, the little microbial strains. So, and the question popped up in my mind, does your work in any form or kind include GMOs?
Not at all. So yes, we have 14 and not yet 40,000. Perhaps one day we will have 40,000.
Yeah.
And no, yes, there are no genetically modified organisms in our collection. So our collection harbors only natural strains that we isolated from natural resources, and also the strains that we finally apply in fermentations are not genetically modified. So the functionalities that they harbor, they have the natural genes in their genome so that they can express the respective functionalities. So our job is it's a very tedious job, so to find the needle in the haystack, so the microorganism that performs best on a specific substrate or even side stream, what we just heard, mainstream or side stream, and to finally develop a fermentation process.
Okay, great. Because this is actually, when it comes to food, GMOs is a very hot discussed topic, and I just wanted to clarify that. Okay, any last question from the audience or comment? Good, then we go into the break. In the short coffee break, we will be back at 12:15. So use the time, mingle, network, inspire, and exchange with each other, and we see each other back at 12:15. Thank you very much.